Oh, from ghoulies and ghosties, long-legged beasties, and things that go bump in the night. Good Lord, deliver us.
Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of The Unexplainable. The Amityville case is without a doubt one of those that has left an indelible mark on the history of the paranormal. On one hand, because the house where the events took place was the scene of a terrifying crime. And on the other hand, because what the Lutz couple, the undisputed protagonists of the story, recounted managed to send a chill down the spine even of the most skeptical. So here is Amityville, the most chilling paranormal case in history. The DeFeo family massacre. On November 13, 1974 at 6:30 post meridian, Ronald DeFeo ran into Harris Bar in Amityville shouting, "Long Island, New York, somebody help me? They shot my father and my mother." Alarmed, people gathered in a group and accompanied him home. A three-story villa located at 112 Ocean Avenue. Once inside, they immediately searched the place and were shocked to find the bodies of all the DeFeo family members lifeless, lying on their beds. The police were called and began the investigation. There were 6 bodies in the house, the DeFeo couple and their 4 children. The only survivor was Roland himself, just 23 years old. The young man suggested that the killer could be a well-known hitman from the local mafia, named Luis Fellini. In that case, it was necessary to offer him the protection he needed so that he wouldn't end up on the list of victims. But once he was taken to the nearest police station and subjected to a more detailed interrogation, the young man began to contradict himself. His version of events was full of holes. It didn't take much to put him at the top of the list of suspects. The investigation continued, and when 2 cardboard boxes were found in the villa, properly labeled with the names Roland and Feo, containing 2 Marlin rifles, 22 and 35 caliber, one of which was used to carry out the massacre. The suspicions against him turned into certainty. Faced with that fact, the young man ended up confessing. At first, he gave several contradictory versions that left many questions unanswered. Later, the dynamics of the crime were meticulously reconstructed. The night before the murders, Roland had put a strong sleeping pill in the dinner of all his family members to make sure that no one would resist. Everyone would go to bed very early, falling into a deep sleep caused by the narcotic. At 3:15, the killer would put his diabolical plan into action. He would have gone to his room to get the rifle, then he would have entered his parents' room and shot them in cold blood. Afterwards, he would have visited his brothers and sisters' rooms one by one and killed them too. Them. No one had any idea what had driven the boy to commit that massacre, but the young man kept repeating that he had been driven to kill by the voices that had been living in his head for a long time now. A statement that, although chilling, did not help him escape his responsibilities. During the trial, Roland was found guilty of the murders and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. But his entry into prison would be only the beginning of an equally devastating terror, which would see as the main character the house where he had lived for 9 years with his family. A horror that, some say, was at the origin of his insane murderous act. The cursed house. As expected, no one wanted to buy the house where Roland DeFeo had massacred his entire family. The house at 112 Ocean Avenue seemed destined to remain uninhabited forever. Besides being the scene of that insane crime, there were rumors that it had been the site of terrible paranormal phenomena on several occasions in the past. Phenomena that, as I was saying, some even believed were the very cause of the insane murder committed by Roland. The years went by, and as we all know, even the most terrifying memories tend to fade, eventually becoming shrouded in the mist of passing time. And one day, in front of the cursed house of the DeFeo family, a young couple stopped, the Lutzes. George and Kathy Lutz had started their life together relatively recently. They were looking for a new place to settle down, a bigger house that would allow them to live more comfortably. And when they heard the price of the house on Ocean Avenue, they couldn't believe their ears. $80,000, a ridiculous amount considering it was a 3-story villa with a garden and a pool. When they asked why the price was so low, the real estate agent decided to be honest and told them the truth. The head of the family, upon hearing that terrifying story, was clearly shaken, but immediately after declared the following: "After all, ghosts don't kill, and neither do houses. Why should we ever give up this incredible opportunity?" His wife shared the same opinion, and without a second thought, they bought it. But the experience they would have in that place would mark them forever. Awful paranormal events. The first night they spent there, the members of the Lutz family were immediately overcome by the feeling that they were not alone within those 4 walls. The next day they asked the priest from their parish if he could bless the house, and the man of course agreed. But that same evening, as soon as he crossed the threshold of the house, a terrifying voice of unknown origin burst out with a "Get out of here." The priest felt the blood freeze in his veins. Though scared, he finished his task as promised, but when the Lutz couple invited him to stay for dinner, he politely declined the invitation and left the house as quickly as possible. And that was just the beginning. One of the most obvious phenomena that the Lutz couple noticed had to do with the temperature inside the house. Although the thermometer at the entrance showed about 20 degrees, inside the house there was a noticeable biting cold. The father's attempt to warm up the place by lighting the fireplace had no effect. That unbearable cold was absolutely unnatural. Iconio and Gilus, determined to stay skeptical, tried every way to explain it, logically, but the fact that there was no way to heat the inside of the house could not be explained in any way. Hours later, in the middle of the night, George woke up because of a loud bang coming from the front door. He jumped out of bed, put on a pair of slippers, and went to check what had happened. He barely glanced at the nightstand clock. It was 3:15. When he reached the door, he opened it, but there was no one on the other side, only his dog, who was nervously running back and forth in the garden. George checked to make sure no one was hiding inside his property. But then he realized that the door to the shed where he kept his tools was open. Certain he had closed it the day before, he checked again, but saw nothing inside. So he decided to let it go and went back to bed. The next day, Giorgio's sleep was interrupted again, this time by an icy cold. As I was saying, the temperature in the house was always low, but on that occasion it had dropped so much that he was forced to put on a heavy robe. He glanced at the clock on the nightstand, and once again it was 3:15. When he opened the door to the room where his wife usually sewed, he was speechless to find that there were hundreds of flies flying around inside. It made no sense at all, considering the time of year. He immediately opened the window to let the insects out of the house, and once the hard task was done, when he was about to go back to sleep, he heard another bang coming from the front door, a sharp blow delivered with extreme force. Trembling with fear, he rushed to the entrance to check, and his body was shaken by a chill when he saw that the front door was wide open. He grabbed the handle to close it, but it had been ripped off its hinges. Every attempt to close it was useless, and the strangest thing was that it seemed to have been forced from inside the house, not from the outside. How was that possible? In the following weeks, the strange phenomena continued without stopping. Rooms that became infested with flies for no apparent reason. Bangs coming from every corner of the house, and sudden temperature drops that forced the members of the Lutz family to wear a jacket even when they were inside their home. Among other things, the worst phenomena always happened at a very specific time of night, 3:15 ante-meridium, the exact time when Ronald DeFeo had killed all the members of his family.
We know that even we involved in research go to a location where haunting phenomena are happening, active phenomena. And you leave and go home, and you give it a lot of attention. Or you listen to the tapes while you're still working on programming. But the phenomenon...
The worst was yet to happen. One night, George was awakened by a strange noise coming from the living room. Unable to understand what had caused it, he got up to check and was surprised to see the fireplace lit. No one in the house would have gone to bed without putting it out first. But then, his surprise turned to terror when he realized that standing there, just a few steps away from him, was a dark shadow. He was able to recognize the legs, the torso, the arms. Its features were human, but there was nothing human about it. Paralyzed by fear, he took a step back, but the sound of the wooden floor caught the entity's attention, and it suddenly turned toward him. At that point, he couldn't hold back a scream of terror and ran to the bedroom to wake up his wife. Back together in the living room, they found the fireplace had gone out, but on the wall above it, they noticed a dark stain. They got closer to examine it more carefully and shuddered when they noticed it was shaped like a face. The same face as the entity that George had seen just a few minutes earlier in that very spot. And that presence appeared several more times inside the house. For example, one night when it materialized in the bedroom of the Lutz's son, or one afternoon in the little room of their youngest daughter, Missy. By the way, for several weeks, Missy had started talking about another presence inside the house, a certain Jody, an entity that, according to her, often played and talked with her. Subsequent investigations by expert demonologists revealed that Jody was a very dangerous demon who mostly took the form of a large pig. And one of the nights when George was awakened by the sounds coming from the garden, the man swore he saw the light in Missy's room turned on, and the little girl standing at the window next to what seemed to be, in fact, a being with the features of a gigantic pig. That terrifying vision, along with all the other phenomena that had tormented the family for months, convinced George that it was time to ask for help. Thanks to a friend, he managed to get in touch with a supposed medium, Francine, who agreed to visit the house. Once there, she immediately went to the kitchen, where she claimed she could smell the scent of aftershave, one of those typical ones used by older men. Later, she said she could sense the presence of an elderly couple, maybe the former owners of the house who had decided to stay there after their death. He visited each room of the villa individually. When he set foot in the basement, Classo Calma was shaken by a deep sense of unease. Francine assured him that a person had been buried in that place, and their negative energy still permeated every corner of the house. In addition to this, she claimed that a murder had taken place there that had nothing to do with those committed by Ronald DeFeo in the 70s. It was a crime that dated back a long time and an atrocity that could still be felt with perfect clarity, especially by a psychic like her. Then she went back up the basement stairs and prepared to go to the second floor of the house. But after taking only a few steps toward Missy's room, she stopped, unable to go any further. In a hurry, she quickly went back down the stairs to reach the ground floor. She told the Lutzes that the negative energy in that place was so strong that even she couldn't bear it. She apologized and quickly fled the house. Before leaving through the door, she added one last sentence. "Please, leave this house as soon as possible and never come back." That experience deeply disturbed the Lutz couple. Confused and discouraged, they once again requested the intervention of Father Pecoraro, the cleric who had blessed the house shortly after they moved in. But no matter how much they begged him to intervene, the man refused to set foot there again. At that point, perhaps driven by the force of desperation, George and Katie decided to make one last attempt. They would try to bless the place themselves with the means at their disposal. They took up rosaries and a crucifix and began to pray, entering each room of the house. But only a couple of minutes after starting this sort of improvised ritual, the walls of the house began to shake, and a terrible voice coming from the basement burst out with a "Stop it." That was the turning point. During the following weeks, the paranormal phenomena became more and more violent and dangerous. All the family members began to be tormented by terrifying nightmares. They would wake up with a start in the middle of the night, their arms and legs covered in scratches or bite marks. George and Katie began to doubt that this torment would ever come to an end. In their hearts, they had hoped it was just a temporary phenomenon, but the situation kept getting worse and worse, and they had to give up. One evening, just as they were discussing what to do while sitting in the living room, the house gave them the answer they were looking for. On the other side of the large window, in the center of the wall, the couple clearly saw two bright, blood-red eyes staring at them. As soon as she noticed, Kate started screaming, and Giorgio, terrified, ran to get the rifle and went out the front door to catch the intruder in the act. But there was no one there, only footprints in the snow in front of the window, which seemed to have been left by a large animal, a huge pig. He didn't have time to think about it, because from inside the house he started to hear his wife screaming at the top of her lungs. When he returned to the living room, he found her on the floor, appearing to have a spasm, but it wasn't physical at all. Katie's body was being dragged across the floor by a supernatural force, against which she couldn't put up any resistance. Trembling with fear, Giorgio helped her up from the floor and accompanied her to the exit. Immediately afterward, he ran to his children's room, picked them up, and left the villa as quickly as possible. That was exactly the moment when he made a drastic decision, fully supported by his wife. Their family would never set foot in that cursed house again. And so it was. It was. The WARRENS investigation. With the Lutz family out of the picture, the house was left in the hands of the paranormal investigators, determined to study it more deeply and understand the origin of its evil nature. And who, if not the Warrens, could have contributed more to the investigation? And Ed and Lorraine immediately sprang into action. But what they experienced in the Amityville house went far beyond their worst expectations. After their intervention, Lorraine even said the following in an interview. "If they gave us $1 million to go back into that house, we wouldn't do it. Neither I nor my husband would do it because it ruined our lives. It was terrible, simply terrible. In that place, my body levitated in that house. What happened was horrible, truly horrible." The first thing that Mr. and Mrs. Warren did was help the Lutz family recover their belongings from inside the house. Neither George nor Katie had the slightest intention of setting foot in that place again, not even for a moment. Once this was done, they began their investigations and performed rituals in an attempt to free the place from the hostile presences that inhabited it. But with every attempt, they ended up being attacked by a brutal force of unknown origin, so violent that it put their very lives at risk. Lorraine said she personally experienced the terror that was felt in the house when Ronald DeFeo carried out the murders. She had visions in which the killer held the rifle and cold-bloodedly shot his family members. It was discovered that a Native American tribe once lived where the house was built, Montau, who had used the land as a place to lock up and let the sick and mentally unstable people of their community die. Another version, however, blamed the curse on the presence beneath its foundations of the tomb of a certain John Ketchum, the man who built the house, and who had come there after being expelled from Salem for practicing black magic. It is said that Ketchum continued to perform his dark rituals in that place, a fact sufficient to attract every kind of demon and evil entity to his dwelling. And this, guys, would be the version of those who have always believed in the words of the Lutz family and the Warrens. But, as always, when handling paranormal cases, it's time to give the floor to the skeptics. Obviously, this story was also widely criticized and discredited by skeptics, especially by those who were convinced that the Lutz couple had made it up to gain financial benefit. In fact, it must be said that when the story became public, the Lutzes gave a lot of interviews, and it was believed that the couple did not give those interviews for free. However, those who believed in the couple's good faith suggested another theory. The case of Ronald DeFeo had brought to light a probable involvement of the local mafia in the murder, which, according to reports, was interested in taking possession of the DeFeo family's property. When Ronald committed the massacre, the Lutz family buying the property would have been unexpected. The only way to force them to leave without resorting to murder again would have been to make them believe that the house was haunted. In short, it would have been the mafia that staged the setup that led to their escape. But as always, this theory is not easily sustainable. If what the Lutz couple claimed was true, how could the group of mobsters have staged some of the most inexplicable events? How would they have been able to create certain illusions? Above all, the appearance of numerous supernatural presences inside the villa. Of course, skeptics also insist on the fact that in the following years, no more paranormal events were reported inside the villa. Yet the neighbors on Ocean Avenue claim that the house has had hundreds of different owners, and that none of them managed to live there for more than a couple of months. The fact that they didn't want to testify about what they experienced inside is another matter. Either way, the Amityville case remains to this day the worst paranormal case in history. But what do you think? Was it all a hoax, an illusion to make the Lutz family flee, or a real phenomenon of supernatural origin? Let me know in a comment. Unexplainable Power. Comment is a series created and written by, hosted by Luca Perella, sound designed by Matteo D'Alessandro. Listen to it on YouTube or on all music and podcast apps.